The UFC has a fight night problem. And that problem is that they're obligated to host a certain number of events under their contract that they have with ESPN right now. And you would think that this is a great thing because, hey, you got more fight nights, more fights, more reasons to get together with your buddies and have some pizza and wings. This is great. Every weekend there's something to do and it's free as long as you have ESPN Plus. But it's just not the way that it is. We're learning here that just because something's free doesn't mean the product is actually good. And these fight nights recently have really been a product of that. Because we've got fights every week now, but most of them are kind of worth skipping unless you're a hardcore fan. And honestly, that's kind of how it used to be, but anymore, it's hard to even get your friends over and show them a fight and say, watch this is going to be a banger, this guy is going to be the next big one up, this girl fight's fantastic, this is a great example of what they have to offer. We just haven't had that in a while, because we're flooded with fights, but they're just not worth watching. And it didn't always used to be this way, did it? I mean, we used to have fight night main events that were kind of meant to determine a number one contender. A fight where you're watching an entertaining fan favorite go at it in a really good fight. But anymore, this is really saved for pay-per-view co-main events. And we're stretched so thin anymore with UFC talents filling these cards with people from the Dana White Contender Series, for example. Or just one-off people that we're signing. Maybe we'll give them 2-3 fights and then we'll cut them. So we're just not seeing that talent on display very often. The name recognition's not there. The talent isn't there. We're filled with a lot of people that we can pay very cheaply fight to fight to have some scraps hopefully thrown. And again, it didn't used to always be this way. The roster was a lot more full. There was a title connotation in these fights, big fan favorites. There wasn't a poor undercard to lean on in case these fights got boring, or at least that's how I thought it was. So I started to look into it a little more. And because, for example, we had something like the Strickland and Abus Nurmagomedov fight before, right? That card, I remember that one being kind of impactful because it led to Strickland in his very next fight, fighting for the UFC title, dethroning Israel Adesanya and becoming champion. Crazy, right? So you must think back to that fight card right beforehand and say, that really must have been something. That must have been special. And then I started looking at it, and I don't think that's the case. I think I have some revisionist history here. When we're looking at this card itself, you've got, of course, Sean Strickland winning that fight. Again, this was a short notice fight that was not meant to happen. The original fight was not even going to be this entertaining or this fun or even with this much recognition. Of course, you had a lightweight co-main event with Grant Dawson, who's great. He's fun. He's a lot of good to him. And Demir here is also very entertaining, very talented. So this is a valid co-main event, in my opinion. Then you have the Michael Morales and Max Griffin. These are good. A little less entertaining now than they were then. Not something that I'd want to see super high on a card, but fair enough. Ariana Lipski has got some slight name recognition as well. BSD being on this fight card is extremely good. Ismail Bonfin as well. Awesome fight. So you know what I mean? We've got this. We've got Kevin Lee. We've got, a couple other little ones here. We got Ivanov on here. This was not a bad card. So, you sit here and you think, this is good, but in fairness, it's not that much better than what we're getting right now. Now, the fight card immediately after this was Emmett versus Topuria. The reason this is valid is because we're going to be talking about the Josh Emmett card that just took place here a moment ago. Now, this was a card where we had Ilia Topuria, the now featherweight champion, someone who looks to be absolutely phenomenal, moving up to 155 soon to fight the top contenders there, if not for the championship right away. And then again, fighting Josh Emmett. This was a really good fight card, so we thought. If you ignore this main event, you've got a Macy Barber co-main, you've got Amanda Hebos on here, you got the Justin Tafas, you've got Bruno Silva and a Neil Magny down there, but this is a weak card. If this card took place right now, and you had Ilia Topuria replaced with just someone that the fans don't really care about per se, you would not have a good card. You would have the exact card that we just had over the weekend. And the only reason we don't look back on this and feel this way really is because the main event fight with Ilya and Josh Emmett was phenomenal. And it was a one-sided beatdown, don't get me wrong, but it was phenomenal. It was a great display of skill, there was aggression, there was grappling. It was an exciting fight, and it was a memorable fight. And that's why this fight card was saved, and that's what made this as good as it was. But again, if you ignore this, then you end up with a fight card like we just saw over the weekend. And we're going to get into this, of course, but really what this came down to is this was not a very good fight card. There were a lot of decisions, not a lot of exciting finishes. There was not a lot of good storyline. The co-main wasn't too interesting. So it really had to lean on that main event again. And the main event in this case was, again, Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy. And this fight was not fun. It was not entertaining. And, you know, we're seeing a lot of people complain about it. We're seeing a lot of issues thrown with it. But it just wasn't enjoyable to watch. You know, Josh Emmett is known to be this hard, one-punch knockout striker. And he fights like that. And he fought like that here, too. You know, he came forward when he could, but he was really just trying to land a knockout punch. He was setting up a little bit, very few combinations, really was not mixing things in very well, aside from 4 takedowns, which, again, is very interesting as he has not had 4 takedowns in his entire UFC career. So this kind of pointed out a couple of things for us. It didn't really show that Josh Emmett's a great wrestler now, but that Lerone Murphy isn't a very good wrestler and can be taken down by someone with the wrestling pedigree of Josh Emmett. So that's interesting nonetheless. It's fun to see, I suppose. But again, Josh Emmett, we like him because of the knockouts that he performs, but he does not always get the chance to do them. And this was a fight that went the distance without Josh Emmett being able to do what he does. And why is that? Well, it's because Lerone Murphy is very good, and we got to see that. He's very technically sound. He doesn't take risks. He doesn't put himself in danger, and he really does what he needs to win a decision. And I saw a lot of comparisons to Leon Edwards in this fight, and it's crazy to think that that is not a good thing, but it was used as an insult here. And the reason being is both of their fighting styles recently have been do the very bare minimum to win. Throw very few strikes. Don't put your opponent in danger. If you think that you've landed something strong, don't follow up. It, truthfully has been very boring on both fronts recently. But again, this is about Lerone Murphy here. He was good. He was the better fighter in this fight, and I can acknowledge that. And I actually scored it for him watching it live, and I read a lot of comments and live threads that disagreed. I didn't think it was that controversial personally, but I did think that you can maybe sway your opinion a little bit if you really value damage versus accuracy and volume and things of the sort. Because when we're looking at this right here, we're seeing total strikes, obviously a big advantage to Lerone. Obviously no subtemps, no reversals, not a whole lot going down here. No knockdowns, but you did have a couple takedowns. They just all came from Josh Emmett. So, and he did have that exciting moment with the big throw, trying to follow up there just to no avail, really. It really was not... it's hard to say that it was boring because of both of them, but it kind of was. Lerone backpedaled the whole time. He struck from a distance. He did not advance. He was not trying to finish the fight in any capacity at any time. But with that said, Josh Emmett needs to be able to enforce his will a little bit. He threw in some takedowns, and that's great, but did he mix it in as well with his striking as he could have? These combinations were missing. He'd throw a big overhand, but was he setting them up? Was he throwing after? There just wasn't a whole lot happening here. So this really went down to both of them being at fault here, and that's unfortunate because, again, Josh Emmett is a very fun fighter, and Lerone Murphy is a good fighter. I think the issue that people are having here is now Lerone won a decision that was a bit boring, maybe not the most dominant in the world, and he's now undefeated with a very good record that doesn't really reflect his skill set when you compare him to the others in the top of the division. Again, a Volkanovski, Diego Lopez, Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria. I don't think you can watch his performance and think that he's going to beat any of them there. And I honestly, you can probably name a few more there, and it's difficult. So This was just a fight that you had to watch a very long fight card to get to because there was a lot of decisions the whole night, and it wasn't worth it in the end. So I get it. I get why people didn't like this. I didn't like this. I didn't like the card. Again, we didn't even have a good co-main necessarily. It just was not overly fun all the way around. The Brad Tavares and GM3 fight here, that was fairly fun, but part of it is because we had name recognition on both sides. But it showed a lack of skill this high up in the UFC. So not a great time. We had a couple good finishes, don't get me wrong, even some good memes coming from Torres Finney here. It was fine. Rise McKee was on here getting his first UFC win finally. That was good, and it was an ass beating for the first bit. There were some moments here, just not a whole lot. This was not a very good card. There was not a lot of good finishes. There was not a lot of memorable moments. It was not a good card. But again, you can compare this back, even just the fight card before this, or two ago, shall I say, with Edwards versus Brady. This was another fight card, again, UK based, that had multiple memorable moments, even the fights that weren't awesome when you think about it. The Leon Edwards-Sean Brady fight was phenomenal, and it was phenomenal because Sean Brady really came out and showed he is one of the very best in the world, and he out-grappled and completely dominated and submitted Leon Edwards for the first time. That was astonishing. In his hometown, there's more to the story, there's a little bit of build-up, some good media behind it. Good fight, good story, good ending to a card. Jan versus Carlos Ulberg here wasn't a super great fight. A little boring again, but again, fine. Name recognition on both sides, title connotation. There was a reason to have that fight. They had the fight, and it was acceptable for sure. Then, again, Gunnar Nelson, Kevin Holland, two more with name recognition. And that was an awesome fight. Really fun. If you haven't seen it, please go back and watch it. It was a good time. The top three fights were absolutely worth watching with change. You go down a little more, you have Molly McCann and Alexia Tiarna. Awesome. There's more name recognition, a good women's fight to have here. Ended with Molly McCann retiring, more memorable moments. I mean, that makes up so much here. Nathaniel Wood on this as well. That's a big one for anyone who's been watching for a little while. Jai Herbert. I mean, this is a good card. For a free fight night card, this is what we're hoping for. This is what we're looking for. We're just not always getting it. Again, Reno Ursig. It wasn't an entertaining fight. Not nearly as bad as some of these other ones we're talking about here, but it was not exciting. Drew Dober was all right. Not a great stoppage, but, Rosas Jr., that brought some name recognition to the card as well for the average fan, the casual. There were some good fights here. It's just this was not overly exciting either. And I think that's what's really started happening here is we're just getting more and more of these cards that are low effort. They're not fun. They rely on a main fight to end up being good, and then it sometimes doesn't happen, and that's an issue. So, what's our solution here? Well, the solution is we need to make sure that these fights make sense. We're not booking main events that are not important to the sport and, more importantly, not fun. Obviously, this is entertainment at the end of the day, and we're not always getting it. But in addition to that, we need to make it so the UFC isn't forced to put on a card when they don't have a good fight for it. And, that likely isn't going to happen until the ESPN deal is done, which it is ending soon. And I might make a whole different video talking about that and who they could go to and why that might restructure the sport. And, the very big dream of them doing something like going to Netflix for their pay-per-view events or offering their own subscription service where for $20 a month you can watch them. The pipe dream, obviously. But, no need to focus too much on that. That's what we need to work towards, just something that's a different story here so that even if we have less fights, there's better fights, and when you turn on the TV, it's worth watching something. I love having these fights. I love having something to look at every week, but sometimes it is hard when you cancel plans to go out or you have people over, whatever the case may be, and then, 6 hours into a fight card, you realize nobody had a good time. That's just not what the UFC is trying to do here. And it's hard. The only other thing I guess I could really say here is when you look at marketing a fighter, it's really a two-way street here. If you look at the Derek Lewis marketing piece that he had years ago, he became a big star. He was in an important spot on the biggest pay-per-view of all time against, having Khabib and Conor, and he had that big spot right there, and he had the cool knockout, come from behind victory, took his pants off, gave a hilarious interview, and the UFC was able to take that and run with it and help with marketing and make him bigger and bigger. And that ended up huge for him and huge for the sport. And he still has name value and recognition off of that. He's known amongst the casual. He gets fight night main events. It's good for him. And it's half up to the fighter, half up to the UFC. They should be better at marketing their people and making it so we're interested in watching them. But it's a little bit up to the fighters too. If they don't have such good technical skill and such exciting fights that we need to watch it, maybe be a little more entertained on the mic or outside the fights, You just got to have something. If you have nothing, then it's a little bit harder. So, we can hope for the ESPN deal to die and us get, something more for some other streaming platform. And maybe in the meantime, hopefully we can get a couple more stars born and something just worth watching a little bit more. But that's my opinion on here anyways. If you guys feel differently, please let me know. I'm still going to watch all of these fight cards, no matter how bad they are, but I hope they start getting a little bit better. All right, peace out.